We're ready to go? All right. Welcome, everybody. I want to thank you for being here today. I know we're at a time where it's late in the day, so I appreciate you sitting through this and coming to listen to our panel session today. We've got some really great expertise here. I'm really happy to have Dell, Cloudera, SyncSort participating with Dell. So before we get into the presentation, just want to go briefly over the essentially the abstract and what we're going to talk about today. This week, Dell, Cloudera, SyncSort, and Intel made a big announcement around essentially the world's first reference architecture around data warehouse optimization and ETL offload. So what we're going to do today is talk to you a little bit about what we're doing around that, but we also want to get perspective to essentially from Intel, SyncSort, and Cloudera so they can tell you what value they add to the solution and really just talk about what's going on in the market today, what trends are we seeing, what's going on with the ecosystem, and really, what's the value that Hadoop is bringing to our customers and what's the value we want to showcase to them. So before we get started, just want to open up with a couple of facts that kind of set the table and help you understand why customers are challenged today. If you look at the research out there today, market research, and essentially what the market research firms are coming out with, what they're showing today is that essentially 70% of your enterprise data warehouses out there in the market today are either at capacity or underperforming. Not only that, when you look at essentially why those enterprise data warehouses are underperforming or at capacity, it's due to the amount of transformations that are going on in that enterprise data warehouse. And essentially what's happening here is that the data transformation has been pushed down to the enterprise data warehouse over time, and this has caused huge problem for our customers, and now they're looking for a better way to do that. And so what we're going to come in and talk to you today is essentially how you can introduce Hadoop into your environment, how you can introduce Dell's reference architecture backed by Intel and Cloudera, and then essentially how we tie that in with SyncSort that allows you now to start using Hadoop as an augmentation tool to your enterprise data warehouse. So that's the focus we're going to take today. So before we get into more detail, let me just tell you who we are and what we do. So my name is Armando Acosta. I'm from Dell. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. I've held various positions within Dell from sales, marketing, product management, strategy. And so my role today is essentially what is the future going to look like for Hadoop and what are the solutions Dell is going to take out. Next, what I'd like to do is just turn it over to my counterparts here. So Brandon, I'll let you go first and tell them who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brandon Drager. I've been in the industry for over 15 years. All that time has been spent in a variety of engineering and marketing roles across a variety of enterprise disciplines from hardware to most recently cloud and big data. And currently, I manage the marketing and business development relationship with Cloudera and other partners for Intel.
Hi, I'm Mark Muncie. Pretty much like everyone else here, I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Held a whole bunch of different roles from customer to vendor to client within engineering, marketing, sales engineering, so a broad reach of everything.
Hi guys, my name is TJ Lair. I work on the product marketing team at Cloudera, focused on developing our enterprise solutions, so the solutions that cut across multiple verticals in the IT and the line of business space. Before I was at Cloudera, I worked at an early stage advanced analytics company, kind of seeing the front end applications that were being developed for these users and the true transformation analytics and big data can have to industries and to organizations at large.
Excellent. Thank you for introducing yourselves. I appreciate that. So, before we get into essentially asking you questions here, just want to set the table for everybody as well. At Dell, we talk about this as a big data journey. We understand that customers want to use Hadoop. They understand that they need to do something around Hadoop. But really the hard first step is what do I do and how do I build it and how do I get there and what does that first step look like? And so for us, what we talk about is the big data journey, right? And when we talk about the big data journey, what we focus on is essentially focusing on a specific use case that allow you to essentially what we call operational efficiency and allow you to take cost out of your organization while implementing a big data solution in there. And then from there, what we talk about is essentially moving up the stack and essentially getting to a use case where you actually transform the business with data. And so with that, we want to make sure that we set the tone for you to understand what we're going to talk about today. And so let me just throw the first question out there, and TJ, I'll throw it out to you. You've been with Cloudera for quite some time, and we know with Cloudera, you're definitely focused on the use case. What's that first traditional use case that you do see with Hadoop today?
Absolutely. So there's a wide variety of use cases you can start with Hadoop. So when it comes down to it, it's identifying your particular challenges that are top of mind for your organization. So from an IT perspective, EDW optimization, creating an active archive, meeting SLAs when it comes to large-scale data processing are usually initial triggers that lead IT organizations to look for alternative solutions, and that solution usually lands on Hadoop. So that's one great kind of example of IT getting started. From a line of business perspective, we see data discovery and analytics as that initial use case. So I'm a marketing professional, I run multiple campaigns, and when I run a campaign, say a webinar, I promote it across 5 or 6 different channels that cut across both structured and unstructured information. I need that information in order for me to properly allocate my resources. And in order to do that, I need access to a wide variety of data, and I need to see it in short order so that I can make the best decisions at the right time. So from a data discovery and analytics perspective, Hadoop's really powerful for the line of business. From an IT perspective, enterprise data warehouse optimization and reaching operational efficiencies with your architecture is kind of where we see those professionals getting started.
Excellent. Now, you did mention data warehouse optimization. Obviously, we're here to talk about that today. But TJ wanted to throw a question, or excuse me, Mark, I want to throw a question your way. So, when we talk about the Dell SyncSort solution, what do you think the value is that we're delivering to our customers and essentially packaging these two solutions together?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of going off of that exact point of the enterprise data warehouse offload is you want to be able to take those expensive operations from ELT in the EDW and put them onto Hadoop. So it's a much more efficient platform for that to work.
Now, let's talk about a little bit more about SyncSort. So, with SyncSort, people are like, okay, why is Dell partnering with SyncSort, and why was your first choice? And, obviously I know why, but, can you go into detail of where SyncSort has been and where you've come and, where you want to go?
We've been in the industry for a long time, over 45 years. We started off on the mainframe doing sort enhancements for mainframe and then into Unix, and then we became an ETL player. And then obviously now we are working inside of Hadoop. We've done things that make the EDW offload story really, really impactful. Number one being the Silk story, where we have a utility called Silk that can ingest SQL scripts, visualize them for the user so that, let's say, someone who wrote the SQL is no longer with the company or the SQL is extremely complex. They can visualize that and then take that visual graph and then deploy that directly into Hadoop and have it execute inside of Hadoop rather than in the EDW.
Okay, and let me elaborate on that a bit. And the reason that we find value in this is what we talk a lot about here at Dell is time to value. And so when we've talked to customers and they said, okay, I want to do it on my own, I want to choose my ETL tool, I want to choose my Hadoop distribution, and I'm going to put it all together. And when we see customers run into that situation, they're willing to do that, but it takes a lot of time, investment, and resources. And so when we say time to value, if you're going to do it and build it on your own, typically what we see, the time to value on that is 18 to 24 months. So if you invested the money, you're trying to make it work, you're trying to build it, you're trying to optimize it, you're trying to design it, but essentially you don't get value out of that project until 18 to 24 months down the road. So what we're trying to do is essentially shorten that time to value. And so what we do with SyncSort, and by combining that with a Dell reference architecture, we're able to cut the hard work from the customer. So what I mean by cutting out the hard work is the customer doesn't have to look at the design of the reference architecture. They don't have to look at the architecture. They don't have to look at the server configuration. They don't have to look at the network configuration. Dell solves all those hard things for them. And now when you combine that with SyncSort, SyncSort allows you to take that SQL code with Silk and translate it into the MapReduce job without having to take that time to learn Pig, Hive, and Scoop. So for us, this is a really powerful message to our customers because we're simplifying it for them and we're going to make it easy. And if you follow it our way, essentially you're going to get time to value in half the time versus 18 to 24 months, where we can get you that time to value within 6 to 8 months. So it's very powerful for customers. So just want to make sure I made that point. So next I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk to Brandon here. So just so y'all know, Brandon used to be my old boss. So, it's funny that I'm sitting here interviewing him, right?
Interrogation.
Exactly. But, Intel has been very interested in Hadoop. At one time you had your own distribution and then you invested in Cloudera. Give us some perspective of, what Intel feels about Hadoop and where do you see it going?
Yeah, as we look back, as Martin mentioned, we had our own distribution up to about a year ago, and I'll kind of start there with why, the problems we saw in the market that kind of caused us to kind of go that route, and then subsequently kind of the things that evolved in the market that caused us to get out of that business. So really, looking back, we felt at the time, a lot of these problems still persist, right? That it wasn't quite ready for the enterprise, and we feel it's come to maturity now. But there were and are still some lagging issues. In particular, when you talk to customers about what are the obstacles that you have, and aside from kind of the more global ones of determining what your project is, what questions you're trying to answer, and tying it to kind of some meaningful insights that you can take action on. We're really around kind of performance at scale. So once, a lot of Hadoop projects kicking the tires often started off with, just really kind of trying to, any old hardware would do, right? Really, the infrastructure optimization really wasn't a key issue then. But now we're seeing that evolve into, customers really do understand their workloads. They've got their applications profiled really well, and infrastructure matters. The other issue we saw, were and still are working on, were around security. So really kind of building out our very robust security. If you kind of think back where Hadoop security was a couple of years ago, it's really come a long way. Cloudera has invested very heavily in that organically, and also through some acquisitions of companies like Gazang to really kind of beef up, all 4 pillars of security, from perimeter access to role-based access control to data security to governance, to really have a very kind of robust story around that. And Intel was working on and continues to work on very heavily on the data security side of that. We've worked on offloading a lot of the traditionally very software-intensive requirements around data encryption and decryption. So now that we basically, Cloudera by default, when they encrypt data within Hadoop, it uses an offload engine called AES-NI, which is in the silicon, and now effectively it's almost a zero cost type of arrangement, right? So we've benchmarked this and tested this very heavily with Cloudera, and now you're really kind of depending on the workload, we see about anywhere from a 0 to about a 3% overhead. So it's really, in the past, it was really kind of a Sophie's choice, right? Of do I choose performance or do I choose security? And now you can really kind of have both. So that's one of the kind of the key areas that we've really focused on. But as we were building out our distribution of Hadoop and really kind of focusing on those performance and security issues, what we saw was kind of this continuing evolution of really kind of a market leadership position for Cloudera. So the problems we were trying to solve, and as far as for a particular distribution, we were also contributing to fragmentation, right? Because we all have our favorite projects that we were participating in. So that was really kind of one of the key drivers to really get to a point of enterprise adoption. We felt like we had to kind of very closely partner with a leader in that space, and that's what we've done with Cloudera.
So that's a good point, security, and I remember, everybody talking about security and say, is Hadoop enterprise ready? Yep. So TJ, I kind of wanted you to elaborate on essentially, security, and maybe go a little bit deeper on, where you see the vision there, and essentially why do we think Cloudera is in the lead?
Absolutely. So when it comes to enterprise data warehouse optimization, chances are you're moving a lot of information that needs to be protected at some level, right? Whether that's customer information, whether that's HR information, or some sort of credit card information. So when you move it into a Hadoop cluster, you need to ensure that that data remains protected from both internal and external threats. So from external threats, making sure that you have encryption key management. And in that realm, we've actually made significant progressions to making sure that when people do land data in their Hadoop cluster and they have strict compliance regulations to adhere to and to meet, they can meet those when they land their data in a Cloudera cluster. Specifically, we are the only Hadoop distribution that has achieved PCI compliance, and we actually did that with one of our customers and partners, MasterCard. So MasterCard was a customer of ours, and they deployed an enterprise data hub within their architecture to offload some of their information and create an enterprise data hub. And obviously, this information was extremely proprietary, and they wanted to make sure it was protected. And they had to go through all the different steps to reach PCI compliance. And it's not only a technology, but also a process standpoint. So once we actually reached and achieved PCI compliance, the service arm of MasterCard said, all right, this is something that every organization is going to need, especially as they continue to migrate more and more information and data into Cloudera's Enterprise Data Hub. So they're actually going around selling that and helping organizations achieve compliance and regulatory standards on our cluster. So from both protection from external threats and then internal threats around making sure that users only access the right information at the right time. So when you have all this data landing in an enterprise data hub, It's great to store it there for the low cost per terabyte when it comes to storage, but you're going to have multiple users from a variety of different departments interacting with this data. So making sure that they can only interact with the right information at the right time is extremely critical.
Thank you. That was a very good summary. I appreciate that. Now, just changing, pace here a little bit. So I want to go back to Mark here and talk about SyncSort. So, we hear a lot of people talk about essentially data integration tools and ETL tools, and essentially, hey, we have the best and we have the secret sauce here. Can you give us a little bit of detail of, how SyncSort's different compared to some of your competition? We don't have to name names, but, just kind of give us, what you do differently and what makes you special in this, this.
I think first off, the biggest differentiator that we have is that we've actually made contributions to the Hadoop ecosystem. I don't think, many people, when you think of SyncSort, it's going to be, we're a big vendor, but when it comes down to it, I think I saw a report where we're the 7th leading contributor to the Hadoop ecosystem. So that continued contribution has actually given us an edge in terms of being able to work natively within the Hadoop ecosystem and things like Yarn. So one of the contributions that we made for Apache MapReduce was able to unlock its ability to call our engine from the Yarn applications, so that when you use the monitoring tools from Cloudera, it's all integrated in there without having to, fidget with other things, whereas some of the other competitors are doing something like code generation. And I don't think I've ever seen any tool that's done any kind of code generation do it well. So you're going to end up with inefficient code that you have to kind of go through and maintain, whereas all we have is an engine that's going to work every single time and work to the best of its ability every single time.
And I like what you just mentioned there. It's, code, writing the code, right? Because that's, when it comes down to it, that's a hard part, especially when you start to adopt a new tool like Hadoop. Because you've got people that are used to writing SQL scripts, and now you're telling them, okay, you got to take that SQL script and now translate it into MapReduce job. And if you don't know Java, you're gonna fumble a little bit. Not only that, once you learn Java, then you've got to learn how to write a MapReduce job. And then on top of that, now you've got to learn Pig, Hive, and Scoop. So it's a lot for a customer to take in at one time and try to adopt this technology. And I think that's been a roadblock, and I think you do solve some of that.
And the biggest thing is what's going to happen next, because Spark's coming down the line, and how are you going to migrate from MapReduce to Spark? And that's one of the challenges that SyncSort's able to solve for a lot of our customers, is being able to, with our continued contributions to the Hadoop ecosystem, is being able to move with it with much agility, so that we're future-proofing a lot of organizations against the evolution of the ecosystem.
So ecosystem, that's another great question. So Brandon, I know Intel's definitely played some hand in the ecosystem and developing the ecosystem. Can you kind of give us some insights of what you have been doing to enable that and make it more robust?
No, absolutely. And outside of turning out technology and various types of innovation, ecosystem support and care and feeding is kind of our primary business, really. So for the ecosystem, really probably 2 categories for that. First, we talk about the developer ecosystem, which is obviously very critical, particularly in spaces like big data analytics, where enterprises really are warmly embracing open source, which is great to see. Intel's been a longtime supporter. I think until probably a couple of years ago, I think Intel was one top 2 or 3 contributors to Linux. We're contributors to various Hadoop projects, Spark, et cetera. So really, our goal is to really kind of empower the developer community. So we've done a lot to not just contribute to those core projects, but really also, as we're building in offload capabilities like AES&I or other extensions that we're adding, really exposing those and making those easier to consume for developers. So creating developer tools. So there's a variety of analytics, developer tools, et cetera, that we're also offering out to the community. So that's certainly a key area of focus, to make sure that those folks are well taken care of. From a commercial ecosystem perspective, really, as we talk about the big data journey, there's kind of many steps along the way, and as customers see more and more value, they often again start with this operational use cases, but as they move into more line of business use cases, right, there's really kind of a broader set of capabilities that they're going to have to bring to bear, right? And not those of us sitting on stage aren't going to be able to answer every single one of those variations and use cases, and there's going to be very specific requirements for different verticals, et cetera, healthcare or what have you. So we're also really working to build out a very broad ecosystem particularly with the work we're doing with Cloudera and making sure that, that as we're taking a use case focus and as we're going to each of these different verticals, we're really trying to understand what are those key customer needs, what's the business problem that we're trying to solve. Because the fact of the matter is, 2 out of every 3 big data projects today are not meeting the expectations of the companies that are set out, right? And there's various reasons for that. So our lofty aspirational goal is, maybe by supporting the developer ecosystem and the broader commercial ecosystem, we get that to, only 1 out of every 3 are failing or something like that, to get a little higher level of success in the marketplace. So yeah, it really is, the ecosystem is very key, for these big data projects in particular. It takes a village to raise a big data project, so to speak, so it's really a collaboration of partners across the industry to make these business objectives really kind of materialize.
Yeah, and let's talk about that in a bit, because we're kind of seeing the same thing at Dell. Is when we come and attack a project, we want to make sure that the customer's at the table. But when the customer comes to the table, we want to make sure that essentially the IT team is there, and then also the business team is there, right? Because that's where we've seen the most success. If everybody's on the same page and everybody's talking the same language and everybody expects the same business outcome, that's where we've seen it very, very successful. So I think that's a very key important part, that everybody's at the table, everybody's talking the same language, and it's just not a business project, it's a business and IT project, and it's very strategic for this company to get it right the first time. So TJ, let me ask you a question out there. I don't want you to leave you hanging out there with nothing to do. What are some of the new things that customers are asking you about, and essentially customers are very interested in? Because, when we've seen Hadoop, it's, the ramp has been pretty significant in a short amount of time from when the original code was written now to, where you see it in not only top 50 top Fortune 50 companies, but, top 100, top 500 now. So can you give us some, ideas of what you're seeing and what customers are asking for?
Absolutely. So I think it's pretty obvious from everybody sitting in this room that the Hadoop ecosystem has matured at a tremendous rate, right? So, back when we were talking about the Google paper and it was only MapReduce and HDFS, that was just the starting point, right? That core Hadoop components have, grown at an unbelievable rate to kind of better meet the needs of the organizations that are deploying it in production environments. So some trends that we see in the market right now are specifically around Spark in streaming capabilities, so streaming ingest and streaming processing capabilities for more real-time applications, whether those applications are BI applications for your internal consumption, or whether those applications are for external consumption through some sort of web interface to create a better user experience for your consumers. The other kind of trend that we see is you want your Hadoop clusters everywhere and anywhere, right? So cloud deployments are definitely coming into the picture a little bit more now, especially as you have kind of ad hoc workloads coming to your Hadoop clusters, right? So if your marketing team wants to spin up a quick analytic workload to analyze a particular campaign, that you don't have to add additional machines. You can spin up a cluster in the cloud real quick, move the workload over there, run the analysis that you need using the Hadoop components, and then you can bring it right back down and make sure that you still have that TCO cost reduction that probably helped you make a business case for bringing in Hadoop in the first place, right? Without continuing to expand, right? But yeah.
Okay, excellent. Now, talking about cloud, because that's been an interesting subject I'm sure you get asked about a lot. So, Mark, let's talk about what SyncSource's doing and essentially what they're doing to enable their software and essentially to run in the cloud. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, we actually have our product out there on the Amazon Marketplace, and you can actually spin up a cluster with SyncSource built in, or you can bring your own license, as it were, if you wanted to install on the cloud as well. So, again, the partnerships that we've made have enabled us to really work very closely with cloud deployments, especially Cloudera and so on and so forth, to be able to provide our software pretty much anywhere, including the cloud. And that's kind of going back to what I was saying about the evolution with the ecosystem in terms of our intelligent execution that can run on Hadoop, whether it be MapReduce version 1 or version 2 or Spark. But not only that, you can run on a standalone server or in the cloud without any changes to the development interface that you've created. You can design once and deploy truly anywhere, and cloud being one of those.
Yeah, it's a very flexible model, gives a lot of choice and flexibility to
Yep.
our customers. So Spark, Spark is always one of those key terms that everybody asks about. So Brandon, I'll get your opinion on Spark first, and what are you thinking about Spark, and where do you think you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's a fad. It's not really going anywhere. No. No, I think, as we see, customers, right, really are all seeking kind of that holy grail, so to speak, right, of real-time, insight, right? Instantaneous, location-specific, customer-specific insight that will, help create that higher level of customer intimacy or close that sale or recommend the next best offer for them to very quickly kind of find the right answer to whatever problem they have or consumer, item they're looking to buy. So I think, Spark is certainly enabling a huge, gap in that part of the market right now where, we look at kind of distributed computing models, how do we kind of align and kind of continue the path that we've had of success with, creating these data lakes? How do we start mining that data and integrating it with more real-time data streams? So you've got, a historical look back, but you've also got potentially more real-time type data to be able to get to those insights faster. So I think it's a very bright future. I think, from a maturity perspective, we're probably, 18 months, if you look back where Hadoop was 18 to 24 plus months ago, we're probably in the same place with Spark. There's still some of the rough edges, but I think just the immense amount of community support and contributions, tidal wave, it's amazing, seeing some of the stats around the amount of contributors to that, both in the open source community and also from a commercial perspective. It's definitely going to be a kind of a core reality here for us. So it's a great new set of capabilities we're really excited to see come to market.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So TJ, let me ask you, on Spark, where are you seeing it happening in Cloudera, and what kind of use cases are you seeing popping up around it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Spark, the main allure to Spark is Spark streaming, right? So when you get into real-time processing capabilities, right? So there's a wide variety of use cases that need and leverage real-time capabilities. It just depends on kind of how your users or the end users need that information, right? So I mean, I would say recommendation engines is a good example, right? The ability to execute machine learning algorithms directly on Spark is really powerful stuff, and I don't want to. I know the presentation before us was in depth, around everything around that. So I'm not going to, add that kind of level of detail. But these are the things you need to start thinking about, and these are the things that the leading edge and the bleeding edge are already thinking about and implementing. Spark is in production environments. People are seeing great returns on it, and it's one of those technologies that's not going away anytime soon.
Excellent. Yeah, and you made some really good points. Where I feel that Spark is really valuable is that I think the data scientists, that's going to make their life a lot easier, right? Because the beauty of a Spark is not only does it give you that processing engine, but like you said, you have Spark streaming, right? You have MLlib now. You have machine learning algorithms that you can pull from, and then on top of that, what's kind of the other hot thing, is graph, right? Graph, how do you graph it out, right? So now you have the capabilities to have GraphX in there as well. So it's really interesting that, that you're not only have the processing engine now, but you also have those analytical modules that you can add on to it. And I think the beauty that, that I've kind of heard from customers is if I write one API, essentially now I can use that API across even Spark Streaming, MLlib, and I don't have to do multiple APIs for every single tool that I have to have in the ecosystem. So I really feel like it's going to streamline that process for them. So we're running out of time here, so what I wanted to do is just give the panelists, one final thought that you'd like to give to our audience here, especially since they sat through this with us at the end of the day. We're standing in front of them in a beer, I'm sure. So I will let, Mark, why don't we give it to you? Let's go ahead and start with you as your final thought, and what do you want to say about the Dell SyncSort partnership?
I'm super excited about this partnership because for the most part, organizations don't have, how do I want to say this? It really is the next step in the evolution of Hadoop. It's a targeted solution for organizations to adopt Hadoop and have the peace of mind of having the reference architecture that's being provided to them, having known that it's going to be tested and verified and everything. So it's going to be like a solid, good way for organizations to offload their data from the data warehouse into Hadoop, saving the organizations tons and tons of money.
Excellent. TJ, what do you want to leave the crowd with here?
Absolutely. Really, really excited about this partnership for the reason that you already addressed. Reducing the time to value to show that early return for Hadoop so that when you do land that initial Hadoop cluster, you can continue to grow off of it, but you have that early return. And when we say EDW early return, we're talking about lower cost per terabyte storage, reduction in TCO. Those types of early returns will give you the clout within your organization to continue to expand the cluster and start moving into those line of business ROI use cases that we're all after.
Okay. Brandon, what are you thinking here?
No, yeah, absolutely. I think we talked earlier about the 2 out of 3 projects, not really ending the way anybody wants them to. I think this is a really kind of perfect sweet spot in that it really it gives a clear kind of ROI to both IT and line of business. So I think that's the thing we see is that I think the IT realm of folks and decision makers certainly get the value of big data and have gone off and implemented their own projects. But I think when you get to the C-suite level, there's still a bit of education and how do I make this tangible, right? What can you tell me that I can fully grok around? What's the value it's adding for me? So I think giving them that initial value proposition of its cost savings, operational savings, that's something that a C-suite level individual can understand, which is hugely valuable. And I think it'll get more customers down that path faster of, kind of the next step of once you've, finally found a way to offload your data warehouse, you're building this data lake, you're able to ingest and use new and different sources of data that are going to allow you to create new services and what have you. I think it's going to, overall, it's going to benefit the broader market by being able to have more tangible solutions like this that kind of jumpstart and get past some of these huge obstacles that often lay in the way.
That's some really great points. So we have a couple of minutes left. I wanted to make sure I took any questions out from the audience. So anybody out there have any questions that they'd like to ask the panel?
Hadoop is running on cheap hardware. Do you see need for capacity management of Hadoop environment?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question again?
Do you need for capacity management of Hadoop environment?
Yeah, I'll take the first swing at that answer. When we look at Hadoop today, the way it was built and essentially the way it was designed was to run on commodity x86 servers. But as we see it mature in the market and you see the development of Yarn and you see new use cases like Spark, Impala, those types of use cases, you actually aren't going to just run it on a commodity server. Once you start to use those use cases and essentially use those tools, you are going to need a more beefier machine than you would just your standard Hadoop data node. So for us, what we see is the value here is we're going to pick the right configuration for you in order to get you the best result. And when we talk about this reference architecture, that's what we do in our lab. We test, we certify, we validate, we look at performance, we look at I/O, we look at essentially what's the right ratio from disk to CPU to memory. So for us, I think you're going to continue to see essentially that higher level of architecture blend with that. And just like Brandon said, right, it's not just about the software code anymore. You do want the most optimized infrastructure to run that code so that you're going to get the full benefits. Anybody want to add anything to that?
No, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, so, I think as you look, the data center, we've instrumented the data center for years, right? And really, we talk about big data and managing the capacity of big data and understanding and how to get more out of your data center. Both are kind of intersecting, right? In one case, you're using big data to have a more efficient data center. In the other case, you're using your data center to have, a more efficient infrastructure that you're delivering services to your business. So yeah, I think absolutely, and Intel and a variety of others in the industry are working on how do we, all this data that we're collecting, Intel, you look at a average, server, it's got hundreds of sensors that we're collecting data from. How do you use that to do things like predictive failure analysis, right? If you could figure out that you're about to lose a whole rack of servers because of one particular setting or one component is about to reach kind of a failure rate zone, wouldn't you like to be able to preemptively go in and power down those servers or enter them into a maintenance window and be able to take advantage of that before you're affecting an SLA on a service you're delivering? So I think overall, in general, I think there's probably room for applying big data analytics kind of technologies to how do we more effectively run our data centers. So.
Okay. TJ, Mark, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think this is the reason why we partner with the best of breed in the ecosystem,
Exactly
right?
what I was
We lean on expertise, when it comes to deploying the right hardware, deploying the right ETL vendor, deploying the best Cloudera or Hadoop configuration, right? So when we do deploy a solution, within an organization, we bring all this expertise to help you achieve your objectives.
Okay. Are there any other questions out there? Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody today for sitting here through with us. I know we're the last meeting of your day probably, so please go enjoy your night. I want to thank the panelists. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, TJ, for sharing your insights. And please come visit us at the Dell booth. We are doing a giveaway for a drone, so if you like to have a drone and play around with that, please come visit the Dell booth, and we'll give you a chance to win that. Thank you very much, and have a great day.